Dearest mother, Carrot wrote, it has been a much better day. I went into the Thieves Guild and arrested the chief miscreant and dragged him to the patrician's palace. No more trouble from him, I fancy. And Mrs. Baum says I can stay in the attic because it is always useful to have a man around the place. This was because in the night there were men, the worse for drink, making a fuss in one of the girls' rooms. And I had to speak to them, and they showed fight. And one of them tried to hurt me with his knee, but I had the protective. And Mrs. Palm says he has broken his patella, but I needn't pay for a new one. I do not understand some of the watch duties. I have a partner. His name is Nobby. He says I am too keen. He says I have got a lot to learn. Now, I think this is true because I have only got up to page 326 in the laws and ordinances of the cities of Ankh and Moorpark. Love to all, your son, Carrot. P.S. Love to Minty. It wasn't just the loneliness, it was the back to front way of living. That was it, thought Vimes. The night watch got up when the rest of the world was going to bed, and went to bed when dawn drifted over the landscape. You spent your whole time in the damp, dark streets in a world of shadows. The night watch attracted the kind of people who, for one reason or another, were inclined to that kind of life. He reached the watch house. It was an ancient and surprisingly large building, wedged between a tannery and a tailor who made suspicious leather goods. It must have been quite imposing once, but quite a lot of it was now uninhabitable and patrolled only by owls and rats. Over the door, a motto in the ancient tongue of the city was now almost eroded by time and grime and lichen, but could just be made out. Fabricati diem PV&C. It translated, according to Sergeant Colin, who had served in foreign parts and considered himself an expert on languages, as to protect and to serve. Yes, being a guard must have meant something once. Sergeant Colin, he thought, as he stumbled into the musty gloom. Now there was a man who liked the dark. Sergeant Colin owed 30 years of happy marriage to the fact that Mrs. Colin worked all day and Sergeant Colin worked all night. They communicated by means of notes. He got her tea ready before he left at night. She left his breakfast nice and hot in the oven in the mornings. They had 3 grown-up children, all born, Vimes had assumed, as a result of extremely persuasive handwriting. And Corporal Nobbs, well, anyone like Nobby had unlimited reasons for not wishing to be seen by other people. You didn't have to think hard about that. The only reason you couldn't say that Nobby was close to the animal kingdom was that the animal kingdom would get up and walk away. And then, of course, there was himself, just a skinny, unshaven collection of bad habits marinated in alcohol. And that was the night watch, just the 3 of them. Once there had been dozens, hundreds, and now just 3. Vimes fumbled his way up the stairs, groped his way into his office, slumped into the primeval leather chair with its prolapsed stuffing, scrabbled at the bottom drawer, grabbed bottle, bit cork, tugged, spat out cork, drank, began his day. The world swam into focus. Life is just chemicals. A drop here, a drip there. Everything's changed. A mere dribble of fermented juices, and suddenly you're going to live another few hours. Once, in the days when this had been a respectable district, some hopeful owner of the tavern next door had paid a wizard a considerable sum of money for an illuminated sign, every letter a different color. Now it worked erratically and sometimes short-circuited in the damp. At the moment, the E was a garish pink and flashed on and off at random. Vimes had grown accustomed to it. It seemed like part of life. He stared at the flickering play of light on the crumbling plaster for a while, and then raised one sandaled foot and thumped heavily on the floorboards twice. After a few minutes, a distant wheezing indicated that Sergeant Colin was climbing the stairs. Vimes counted silently. Colin always paused for 6 seconds at the top of the flight to get some of his breath back. On the 7th second, the door opened. The sergeant's face appeared around it like a harvest moon. You could describe Sergeant Colin like this. He was the sort of man who, if he took up a military career, would automatically gravitate to the post of sergeant. You couldn't imagine him ever being a corporal, or for that matter, a captain. If he didn't take up a military career, then he looked cut out for something like perhaps a sausage butcher. Some jobs where a big red face and a tendency to sweat even in frosty weather were practically part of the specification. He saluted and, with considerable care, placed a scruffy piece of paper on Vimes' desk and smoothed it out.
Evening, Captain, he said. Yesterday's incident reports and that. Also, your 4 pence to the tea club. What's this about a dwarf, Sergeant?
Said Vimes abruptly. Colin's brow wrinkled.
What dwarf? The one who's just joined the watch. Name of,
Vimes hesitated.
Carrot or something. Him?
Colin's mouth dropped open.
He's a dwarf? I always said you couldn't trust them little buggers. He fooled me all right, Captain. The little sod must have lied about his height.
Colin was a sizist, at least when it came to people smaller than himself.
Do you know he arrested the president of the Thieves Guild this morning? What for? For being a president of the Thieves Guild, it seems.
The sergeant looked puzzled.
Where's the crime in that? I think perhaps I had better have a word with this Carrot,
said Vimes.
Didn't you see him, sir? Said Colin. He said he'd reported to you, sir. I must have been busy at the time. Lot on my mind,
said Vimes.
Yes, sir,
said Colin politely. Vimes had just enough self-respect left to look away and shuffle the strata of paperwork on his desk.
We've got to get him off the streets as soon as possible, he muttered. Next thing you know, he'll be bringing in the chief of the Assassin's Guild for bloody well killing people. Where is he? I sent him out with Corporal Nobbs, Captain. I said he'd show him the ropes, sort of thing. You sent a raw recruit out with Nobby?
Said Vimes wearily. Colin stuttered.
Well, sir, experienced man, I thought. Corporal Nobbs could teach him a lot. Let's just hope he's a slow learner, said Vimes, ramming his brown iron helmet on his head. Come on.
When they stepped out of the watch house, there was a ladder against the tavern wall. A bulky man at the top of it swore under his breath as he wrestled with the illuminated sign.
It's the E that doesn't work properly, Vimes called up.
What?
The E. And the T sizzles when it rains. It's about time it was fixed.
Fixed?
Oh, yes, fixed. That's what I'm doing all right.
Fixing. The watchman splashed off through the puddles. Brother Watchtower shook his head slowly and turned his attention once again to his screwdriver. Men like Corporal Nobbs can be found in every armed force. Although their grasp of the minutiae of the regulations is usually encyclopedic, they take good care never to be promoted beyond, perhaps, corporal. He tended to speak out of the corner of his mouth. He smoked incessantly, but the weird thing, Carrot noticed, was that any cigarette smoked by Nabi became a dog end almost instantly, but remained a dog end indefinitely or until lodged behind his ear, which was a sort of nicotine elephant's graveyard. On the rare occasions he took one out of his mouth, he held it cupped in his hand. He was a small, bandy-legged man with a certain resemblance to a chimpanzee who never got invited to tea parties. His age was indeterminable, but in cynicism and general world weariness, which is a sort of carbon dating of a personality, he was about 7,000 years old.
A cushy number, this route,
he said as they strolled along a damp street in the merchant's quarter. He tried a door handle. It was locked.
You stick with me, he added, and I'll see you're all right. Now, you try the handles on the other side of the street. Oh, I understand, Corporal Nobbs. We've got to see if anyone's left their store unlocked, said Carrot. You catch on fast, son. I hope I can apprehend a miscreant in the act, said Carrot zealously. Yeah, said Nobby uncertainly. But if we find the door unlocked, I suppose we must summon the owner, Carrot went on, and one of us would have to stay to guard things, right? Yeah, Nobby brightened. I'll do that, he said. Don't you worry about it. Then you could go and find the victim. Owner, I mean.
He tried another doorknob. It turned under his grip.
Back in the mountains, said Carrot, if a thief was caught, he was hung up by the...
He paused idly, rattling a doorknob. Nobby froze.
By the what?
He said in horrified fascination.
I can't remember now, said Carrot. My mother said it was too good for them anyway. Stealing is wrong.
Nobby had survived any number of famous massacres by not being there. He let go of the doorknob and gave it a friendly pat.
Got it,
said Carrot. Nobby jumped.
Got what?
He shouted.
I remember what we hang them up by,
said Carrot.
Oh,
said Nobby weakly.
Where? We hang them up by the town hall, said Carrot. Sometimes for days. They don't do it again, I can tell you. And Bjorn strong in the arms your uncle.
Nobby leaned his pike against the wall and fumbled a fagin from the recesses of his ear. One or two things, he decided, needed to be sorted out.
Why do you have to become a guard, lad? He said. Everyone keeps on asking me that, said Carrot. I didn't have to. I wanted to. It will make a man of me.
Nobby never looked anyone directly in the eye. He stared at Carrot's right ear in amazement.
I mean, you ain't running away from anything,
he said.
What would I want to run away from anything for?
Nobby floundered a bit.
There's always something. Maybe you was wrongly accused of something. Like maybe, he grinned, maybe the stores was mysteriously short on certain items and you was unjustly blamed. Or certain items was found in your kit and you never knew how they got there. That sort of thing. You can tell old Nobby. Or, he nudged Carrot, perhaps it was something else, eh? Cherchez la femme, eh? Got a girl into trouble?
Carrot began, and then remembered that, yes, one should tell the truth. even to odd people like Nobby, who didn't seem to know what it was. And the truth was that he was always getting Minty into trouble, although exactly how and why was a bit of a mystery. Just about every time he left after paying calls on her at the Rock Smacker cave, he could hear her father and mother shouting at her. They were always very polite to him, but somehow merely being seen with him was enough to get Minty into trouble.
Yes,
He said.
Often the case,
Said Nobby wisely.
all the time,
Said Carrot.
just about every night, really. Blimey,
Said Nobby, impressed. He looked down at the protective.
is that why they make you wear that then? What do you mean? Well, don't worry about it,
Said Nobby.
everyone's got their little secret, or big secret, as it might be. Even the captain. He's only with us because he was brung low by a woman. That's what the sergeant says. Brung low.
Goodness, said Carrot. It sounded painful.
But I reckon it's 'cause he speaks his mind. Spoke it once too often to the patrician, I heard. Said the Thieves Guild was nothing but a pack of thieves or something. That's why he's with us. Don't know, really.
He looked speculatively at the pavement and then said,
So, where you staying, lad? There's a lady called Mrs. Palm.
Carrot began. Nobody choked on some smoke that went. So Nobby choked on some smoke that went the wrong way.
In the shades?
He wheezed.
You're staying there? Oh, yes. Every night? Well, every day, really. Yes. And you've come here to have a man made of you. Yes. I don't think I should like to live where you come from,
Said Nobby.
Look,
Said Carrot, thoroughly lost.
I came because Mr. Vernasher said it was the finest job in the world, upholding the law and everything. That's right, isn't it? Well,
Said Nobby.
as to that, I mean, upholding the law. Once, yes, before we had all the guilds and stuff, the law sort of thing ain't really. These days, everything's more, oh, I don't know. Basically, you just ring your bell and keep your head down.
Nobby sighed. Then he grunted, snatched his hourglass from his belt, and peered in at the rapidly draining sand grains. He put it back, pulled the leather muffler off his bell's clapper, and shook it once or twice. Not very loudly.
12 of the clock, he muttered, and all's well. And that's it, is it?
Said Carrot, as the tiny echoes died away.
More or less, more or less.
Nobby took a quick drag on his dog end.
Just that. No moonlight chases across rooftops. No swinging on chandeliers. Nothing like that,
Said Carrot.
Shouldn't think so,
Said Nobby fervently.
I never done anything like that. No one ever said anything to me about that.
He snatched a puff on his cigarette.
A man could catch his death of cold chasing around on rooftops. I reckon I'll stick to the bell if it's all the same to you. Can I have a go?
Said Carrot. Nobby was feeling unbalanced. It can be the only reason why he made the mistake of wordlessly handing Carrot the bell. Carrot examined it for a few seconds, then he waved it vigorously over his head.
12 of the clock,
He bellowed.
and all's well.
The echoes bounced back and forth across the street and finally were overwhelmed by a horrible, thick silence. Several dogs barked somewhere in the night. A baby started crying. Shh, hissed Nobby.
Well, it is all well, isn't it?
Said Carrot.
It, it won't be if you keep on ringing that bloody bell. Give it here. I don't understand,
said Carrot.
Look, I've got this book Mr. Fernaschi gave me.
He fumbled for the laws and ordinances. Nobby glanced at them and shrugged.
Never heard of 'em, he said. Now just shut up your row. You don't want to go making a din like that. You could attract all sorts. Come on, this way.
He grabbed Carrot's arm and bustled him along the street.
What sorts?
Protested Carrot as he was pushed determinedly forward.
Bad sorts,
muttered Nobby.
But we're the watch. Damn right. And we don't want to go tangling with people like that. Remember what happened to Gaskin?
I don't remember what happened to Gaskin, said Carrot, totally bewildered. Who is Gaskin?
Before your time,
mumbled Nobby. He deflated a bit.
Poor bugger. Could have happened to any of us.
He looked up and glared at Carrot.
Now stop all this, you hear? It's getting on my nerves. Moonlight bloody chase is my bum.
He stalked along the street. Nobody's normal method of locomotion was a kind of sidle, and the combination of stalking and sidling at the same time created a strange effect, like a crab limping.
But,
said Carrot,
in the book, it says, I don't want to know from no book,
growled Nobby. Carrot looked utterly crestfallen.
But it's the law,
he began. He was nearly terminally interrupted by an axe that whirred out of a low doorway beside him and bounced off the opposite wall. It was followed by sounds of splintering timber and breaking glass.
Hey, Nobby,
said Carrot urgently.
There's a fight going on.
Nobby glanced at the doorway.
A curse there is, he said. It's a dwarf bar. Worst kind. You keep out of there, kid. Them little buggers like to trip you up and then kick 12 kinds of shit out of you. You come along, old Nobby, and
he grabbed Carrot's tree trunk arm. It was like trying to tow a building. Carrot had gone pale.
Dwarfs drinking and fighting, he said. You bet, said Nobby, all the time. And they use the kind of language I wouldn't even use to my own dear mother. You don't want to mix it with them. They're a poisonous bunch of, don't go in there.
No one knows why dwarfs, who at home in the mountains lead quiet, orderly lives, forget it all when they move to the big city. Something comes over even the most blameless or iron ore miner and prompts him to wear chainmail all the time, carry an axe, change his name to something like Grab Throat Shin Kicker, and drink himself into surly oblivion. It's probably because they do live such quiet and orderly lives back home. After all, probably the first thing a young dwarf wants to do when he hits the big city after 70 years of working for his father at the bottom of a pit is have a big drink and then hit someone. The fight was one of those enjoyable dwarfish fights with about 100 participants and 150 alliances. The screams, oaths, and the ringing of axes on iron helmets mingled with the sounds of a drunken group by the fireplace who, another dwarfish custom, were singing about gold. Nobby bumped into the back of Carrot, who was watching the scene with horror.
Look, it's like this every night in here, said Nobby. Don't interfere. That's what the sergeant says. It's their ethnic folkways or something. You don't go messing with ethnic folkways. But,
Carrot stuttered.
these are my people, sort of. It's shameful acting like this. What must everyone think? We think they're mean little buggers, said Nobby. Now come on.
But Carrot had waded into the scuffling mass. He cupped his hands around his mouth and bellowed something in a language Nobby didn't understand. Practically any language, including his native one, would have fitted that description, but in this case, it was Dwarfish.
Gerduk, Akazil, Azim, Keberkse, Tizim.
The fighting stopped. 100 bearded faces glared up at Carrot's stooped figure. Their annoyance mingled with surprise. A footnote, the Dwarfish translates literally as good day, good day. What is all of this that is going on here in this place? A battered tankard bounced off his breastplate. Carrot reached down and picked up a struggling figure without apparent effort.
Juk, Yerder Turud et Tuza. Herderzerd, Dezek, there is a hook, who's a carrot, but two does, Kagek, Meek, Buturet, Padebek, Kader Durk, Kaheted, Abadatuk.
Listen, sunshine. Literally, the stare of the great hot eye in the sky, whose fiery gaze penetrates the mouth of the cavern. I don't want to have to give anyone a smacking. So if you play Batuz with me, I'll play Batuz with you, okay? Batuz is a popular dwarfish game which consists of standing a few feet apart and throwing large rocks at one another's head. No dwarf had ever heard so many old tongue words from the mouth of anyone over 4 feet high. They were astonished. Carrot lowered the offending dwarf to the floor. There were tears in his eyes. You're dwarfs, he said. Dwarfs shouldn't be acting like this. Look at all you. Aren't you ashamed? 100 bone-hard jaws dropped. I mean, look at you. Carrot shook his head. Can you imagine what your poor white-bearded old mother, slaving away back in her little hole, wondering how her son is getting on tonight? Can you imagine what she'd think if she saw you now? Your own dear mothers, who first showed you how to use a pickaxe. Nobby, standing by the doorway in terror and amazement, was aware of a growing chorus of nose blowings and muffled sobs as Carrot went on. She's probably thinking, who I expect he's having a quiet game of dominoes or something. A nearby dwarf, wearing a helmet encrusted with 6-inch spikes, started to cry gently into his beer. And I bet it's a long time since any of you wrote her a letter, too, and you promised to write every week. Nobby absent-mindedly took out a grubby handkerchief and passed it to a dwarf who was leaning against the wall, shaking with grief. Now then, said Carrot kindly, I don't want to be hard on anyone, but I shall be coming past here every night from now on, and I shall expect to see proper standards of dwarf behavior. I know what it's like when you're far from home, but there is no excuse for this sort of thing. He touched his helmet. Gahruk took. Evening all, literally. Felicitations to all present at the closing of the day. He gave them all a bright smile and half walked, half crouched out of the bar. As he emerged into the street, Nobby tapped him on the arm. Don't you ever do anything like that to me again, he fumed. You're in the city watch.
Don't give me any more of this law business. But it is very important,
said Carrot seriously, trotting after Nobby as he sidled into a narrower street.
Not as important as staying in one piece, said Nobby. Dwarf bars. If you've got any sense, my lad, you'll come in here and shut up.
Carrot stared up at the building they had reached. It was set back a little from the mud of the street. The sounds of considerable drinking were coming from inside. A battered sign hung over the door. It showed a drum.
A tavern, is it? Said Carrot thoughtfully. Open at this hour? Don't see why not, said Nobby, pushing open the door. Damn useful idea. The mended drum. And more drinking.
Carrot thumbed hastily through the book.
I hope so,
said Nobby. He nodded to the troll, which was employed by the drum as a splatter. Footnote, like a bouncer, but trolls use more force.
Evening, Detrius. Just showing the new lad the ropes.
The troll grunted and waved a crusted arm. The inside of the mended drum is now legendary as the most famous disreputable tavern on the Discworld, and such a feature of the city that, after recent unavoidable decorations, the new owner spent days recreating the original patina of dirt, soot, and less identifiable substances on the walls, and imported a ton of pre-rotted rushes for the floor. The drinkers were the usual bunch of heroes, cutthroats, mercenaries, desperados, and villains, and only microscopic analysis could have told which was which. Thick coils of smoke hung in the air, perhaps to avoid touching the walls. The conversation dipped fractionally as the two guards wandered in, and then rose to its former level. A couple of cronies waved to Nobby. He realized that Carrot was busy.
What you doing? He said. And no talking about mothers, right? I'm taking notes, said Carrot grimly. I've got a notebook. That's the ticket, said Nobby. You'll like this place. I comes here every night for my supper. How do you spell contravention?
Said Carrot, turning over a page.
I don't,
said Nobby, pushing through the crowds. A rare impulse to generosity lodged in his mind.
What do you want to drink? I don't think that would be very appropriate, said Carrot. Anyway, strong drink is a mocker.
He was aware of a penetrating stare in the back of his neck. He turned and looked into the big, bland, and gentle face of an orangutan. It was seated at the bar with a pint mug and a bowl of peanuts in front of it. It tilted its glass amicably toward Carrot and then drank deeply and noisily by apparently forming its lower lip into a sort of prehensile funnel and making a noise like a canal being drained. A canal being drained. Carrot nudged Nobby.
Here's a monk,
he began.
Don't say it,
said Nobby urgently.
Don't say the word. It's the librarian. Works up at the university. Always comes down here for a nightcap of an evening. And people don't object? Why should they? Said Nobby. He always stands his ground, just like everyone else.
Carrot turned and looked at the ape again. A number of questions pressed for attention, such as, where does it keep its money? The librarian caught his gaze, misinterpreted it, and gently pushed the bowl of peanuts towards him. Carrot pulled himself to his full impressive height and consulted his notebook. The afternoon spent reading the law and ordinances had been well spent.
Who is the owner, proprietor, leasee, or landlord of the premises?
He said to Nobby.
Was that?
Said the small guard.
Landlord? Well, I suppose Charlie here is in charge tonight. Why?
He indicated a large, heavy-set man whose face was a net of scars. Its owner paused in the act of spreading the dirt more evenly around some glasses by means of a damp cloth and gave Carrot a conspiratorial wink.
Charlie, this is Carrot,
said Nobby.
He's stopping along of Rosie's Palms.
What? Every night?
Said Charlie. Carrot cleared his throat.
If you are in charge,
he intoned,
then it is my duty to inform you that you are under arrest.
Arrest of what, friend?
Said Charlie, still polishing.
Under arrest,
said Carrot,
with a view to the presentation of charges to wit, 1, that on or about 18th Green at a place called the Mended Drum, Filigree Street, you did A, serve, or B, did cause to serve alcoholic beverages after the hours of 12 midnight, contrary to the provisions of the Public Ale Houses Opening Act of 1678, and 1, on or about 18th Green at a place called the Mended Drum, Filigree Street, you did serve or did cause to serve alcoholic beverages in containers other than of a size and capacity laid down by aforesaid act, and 2, that on or about 18th Green at a place called the Mended Drum, Filigree Street, you did allow customers to carry unsheathed edged weapons of a length greater than 7 inches, contrary to section 3 of said act, and 2, that on or about 18th Green at a place called the Mended Drum, Filigree Street, you did serve alcoholic beverages in the premises apparently unlicensed for the sale and or consumption of said beverages, contrary to section 3 of the aforesaid act.
There was dead silence as Carrot turned over another page and went on.
It is also my duty to inform you that it is my intention to lay evidence before the justices with a view to the consideration of charges under the Public Foregatherings Gambling Act 1567, the licensed premises Hygiene Acts of 1433, 1456, 1463, 1465, and 1470 through 1690, and also
he glanced sideways at the librarian, who knew trouble when he heard it coming and was hurriedly trying to finish his drink.
The Domestic and Domesticated Animals Care and Protection Act 1673.
The silence that followed held a rare quality of breathless anticipation as the assembled company waited to see what would happen next. Charlie carefully put down the glass, whose smears had been buffed up to a brilliant shine, and looked down at Nobby. Nobby was endeavoring to pretend that he was totally alone and had no connection whatsoever with anyone who might be standing next to him and coincidentally wearing an identical uniform.
What did he mean, justices?
He said to Nobby.
There ain't no justices.
Nobby gave a terrified shrug.
No, is he?
Said Charlie.
Make it easy on yourself,
said Carrot.
This is nothing personal. You understand?
Said Charlie to Nobby.
It's just a what's name. Had a wizard in here and the other night talking about it. Sort of bendy educational thing, you know?
He appeared to think for a moment.
Learning curve. That's what it was. It's a learning curve. Detritus, get your big stony ass over here a moment.
Generally, about this time in the Mended Drum, someone throws a glass. And in fact, this now happened.